everyone, it's Jen. I thought I would just make another video to show what I have been working on with my project. So this past week I have been working on implementing the exploration in the game as well as like random encounter. And so what we've added here to our objects is the locations, and so I have here region because that's kind of going to dictate some of the behaviors of like what kind of background shows during combat and stuff like that. Visits is going to keep track of how many times the player visits the room so that I can avoid having too much redundant dialogue. And then this is something new that I've kind of been experimenting with my location systems to try to make an easier way of having the player travel from room to room. So this is basically just what location is going to be north, south, east, and west of the current location. And how I'm implementing that in my scripts here is that when I'm having the player navigate, it's going to check to see first if there is a room that's north of the room that you're currently in, and if there is a room that's north of it, it is just going to plug in that name right here and jump to that label. I feel like there's a way to do this that would be more modular, that I probably wouldn't have to even like put in this this name here, but at least for now, this is what I'm able to work with, and maybe in the future I'll be able to come up with a way of making just like one script that can serve in the place of like every location instead of making a separate script for each location. But already I've made it less cumbersome, and I was basically able to like kind of plug in these like 35 locations like in an hour, which would have taken me much longer to program in the past when I was kind of doing each script separately, like in my first Soul Union game. So one of the things I was thinking about as I was coming up with like the dialogue for these areas is I wanted to have unique dialogue for when the player enters a location for the first time to kind of reward exploration, and then I wanted to have different dialogue that could kind of build a little bit of story and character but wasn't like vital for the player to unlock, like it's not crucial information that I need to have the player know. And then I also wanted to have dialogue that was going to trigger if the player, for whatever reason, ends up visiting a location like just a ridiculous number of times, to kind of say, hey, stop coming here, you need to move on. So that's kind of what this conditional is here, is it's checking to see how many times the player has visited this location. If it is the first time, for this particular location, because it's the first location I wanted to describe the setting, but I realized as I was kind of going through these dungeon tunnels that like there was only so many ways to describe like a dungeon tunnel that seemed interesting or even worth reading. So I kind of switched my mindset to have the conversations be more about learning about your companions and about kind of like what type of a world this is. So it really ended up being more of like this ongoing conversation that you're having with your companions as you go through. And so it doesn't necessarily matter which rooms you go to. You could skip a bunch of the rooms that are like irrelevant, that are kind of more just pathways into dead ends, and still unlock the important dialogue. So I kind of made sure when I was going through like what is the shortest route, and put all the important dialogue up until that point, and then after you've kind of triggered all the necessary dialogue, it goes into this kind of randomized dialogue that I hope that I have enough randomized dialogue that it won't get too redundant. And that's kind of also where I went with when you visit a room more than one time, but less than 5 times, I have another random dialogue trigger. Sorry, where's my tutorials? Where then I have like a series of like many different random options, so hopefully again this won't get too redundant even if the player gets a little bit stuck and has to backtrack. And then I have these random dialogues for if the player has visited a location like over 5 times, they will get this kind of like, we need to like move along kind of style of dialogue. How I keep track of the player's location is every time they enter a label for the first time, it will set their current location to true, as well as setting their number of visits. This also is an opportunity to trigger the possible random encounter. So when you're moving, you have a 30% chance of triggering a combat situation, which is what the, sorry, not that. Oh yes, this is what this is that if they roll 1 through 7, they have a chance of finding some random money. They have it, you know, just different flavor text for saying that, oh, you managed to avoid combat. And then they have a 30% chance of stumbling upon the enemy. And then once they jump out, once the combat is resolved, there is a call statement. I'm sorry, once the combat is resolved, they are jumped to this label here, which does not move the counter. It does not trigger the random encounter. And once they leave the location, they'll start at the beginning of the label again. So again, they will trigger the footsteps. They'll trigger the this reset call statement, which basically sets all of the current locations to false, and then they will trigger the location label that they're at to be current true, and they will add to the visit counter, and they will trigger the random encounter. And if there's no combat, then it will go to the kind of like the, everything seems safe in here, and then you have the dialogue and the kind of like the little story bit. If you trigger the encounter, you will go straight to combat, and then the combat will exit you here at this move label, will jump you here, and then because it will be checking to see what your current location is. So you're in the dungeon location. So it will be checking to see what your current location is, and then it will jump you to that label, back to that label, so that you won't be resetting your location or resetting your visits or resetting the possible encounter. It'll just jump you here, where you will, now that you've resolved the combat, you will be able to explore the area or have the description of the area and trigger the dialogue for that area before you have the option to again move to the next location. So that's kind of what this looks like right now. I have just a screen displayed here to show a very brief amount of information for the player to refer to. Again, this is the flavor dialogue that is here. And we have already set our current location to being this first dungeon room, and we've already set the visits. And so now we can move, and it's doing that random encounter there. So we did run into an encounter. I have this set up kind of like a tutorial, so it's kind of giving the player just different prompts to help them navigate battle.
Let's roll. Double bonus. Double bonus.
Then we're gonna go ahead and go with this combat situation. I haven't introduced the betting and wagering system yet, since this is the player kind of like at the beginning of the story trying to escape from this dungeon. It didn't really make sense to have like the betting mechanic in here. So that will be introduced once the player leaves the dungeon.
Whoa, lucky.
For story purposes. And there's also a series of dialogues that unlock as the player either wins or loses battles. And then we can see here, if I open our developer thing, that we start at the beginning of the dungeon location, where it checked to see which dungeon we're currently at with the true and false statement. It moved us to that secondary part of the label where it's not dungeon 02, but it's dungeon 02 move. So it skips the setting. Oh, so I'm sorry, that was before, I think. But anyways, it moved us to the second location, which we had moved to before the encounter triggered, so that it would know to spit us back at the story part of this label. Where it's telling us now we have a pathway to split. It's going into this kind of descriptive dialogue that is based on this call statement of this like series of story chat, because we are visiting this place for the first time. So that's kind of where these important story moments, or these story moments that I want to guarantee that the player is going to trigger regardless of where they explore. This is where I've put this dialogue. And then we have the choice again menu. And when I was making these labels, it was pretty easy for me to just like duplicate the label, change it to like dungeon, to the new dungeon number, just hit Control F, and then just take like the underscore 35, and then just replace that with the underscore 36, the new label. Just say replace that all, and then just replace this text with a different text. So this is the one repetitive text that they're going to have. I wanted to have an indicator for the player to like be able to keep track of what location they're at, should they be kind of like going in circles. So this one-liner will be the one that they read over and over again, that will remain consistent to this particular location. But it's not like a whole paragraph of like your companion just like rattling off the same thing over and over again. It's like it's a very simple one sentence description of the area. And so that is kind of where I'm at right now. The other thing that I did do, and we'll see it here on this trigger, is that I did simplify this deployment, so there's not this extra confirm over here. You just click on the name and it'll deploy without having to confirm. And then I put the most important information, like their dice, hit points, element, and faction on the card for easy reference. But then if you wanted to go in and have a more detailed description, of the character, then you can go into this guild sheet and it'll let you click on the characters that you currently have employed. Now for the common units, it's not as important because the only additional information that you'll probably want to refer to is their loyalty and their bond level. But with the named characters, it will give a detailed description of what their skill triggers are. So if I go here to like a different save file, you can see there's more things unlocked in this particular file. But if I go here to the character description, it tells you a detailed description of what the percentages of their skill triggers are and what their effect is and what the conditions are for that skill trigger. So that will probably be something that you would want to look at when you get a unit for the first time, and if you're trying to track like where their loyalty and bond level is at. The other new tab that I've added is this Tactics tab for easy reference for seeing what your elemental and faction bonuses are, and just like a rundown of the basic battle strategy mechanics. Not that it's super complicated, but just in case you're kind of going really fast through the dialogue on your first playthrough run, you miss some of the tutorial information. Here is your character sheet, so you can see at level 7 I have unlocked all the currently available skills, and you have your mana breakdown and what exactly their effect is and how they are affected by your loyalty bonuses. You can go back to that deployment. Your shop here has a randomized chance of selecting 3 different units for you to try to add to your roster, and the price for them is also randomized anywhere from like 250 to 400 gold. If I try to select a character that I already have, it doesn't let you purchase it. There's no benefit to that. And then once you get your loyalty high enough in order to advance your bond level, you will go to this chat option to unlock specific character dialogue with your companions, that once you have gone through their story moment, then it'll increase their bond level, and that's the actual variable that will increase the effectiveness of your leadership commands to when that unit is present in your deployment. Okay, well that's what I have so far. Thanks for following my development. I'm sure there's a lot more efficient ways of doing what it is I'm doing, so if anybody has any suggestions, advice to give in the comments below, we appreciate that, and hope you're all having a great new year, maybe fired up about some new projects. Don't forget to enjoy the process. Bye.